Episode 56 AI March 23, 2023, The Wood Burning is Not Carbon Neutral Issue. Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, CRAWSEpresidents.wordpress.com and scroll down for PDFs of articles with URLs to search on. And on the website are links to 10-minute TikTok and YouTube videos and 30-minute podcasts on Spotify and Podbean. Historical Opinion. On April 23, 2018, the Environmental Protection Agency announced that it would begin to count the burning of forest biomass, aka wood, as carbon neutral. Opinions that wood burning is not carbon neutral from 2023, 2022, 2021, 2020, 2019, 2018, and 2016 follow. Burning Issues Online has been telling the scientific truth about the carbon pollution of wood burning from as early as 2004. In 2023, strategy to inform the public that wood burning is not carbon neutral. The problem. On December 22, 2022, the United States $1.7 trillion omnibus spending bill declared forest bioenergy carbon neutral and instructed federal agencies to adopt policies supporting that assumption, discarding efforts in both the House and Senate to avoid the terminology. What can ordinary people do? Carbon neutral terminology applies to the biomass, wood, burning industry. It does not necessarily apply to residential wood burning. The emphasis and education of the public should be on the adverse health effects to near neighbors of residential wood burners, and the new efficient tools for measuring hyperlocalized PM 2.5 emitted by residential wood burning above safe limits set by the EPA. These new Purple Air PM 2.5 monitors should be employed to regulate and shut down polluting residential wood burning. Deployment of PM 2.5 monitors to shut down residential wood burning may take state legislation or passage of local laws. Strategies should include rapid response to falsehoods about wood burning PM 2.5 emissions, using social media, podcasts, and videos on YouTube and TikTok. Working to obtain grants for PM 2.5 monitors for near neighbors. Working with health departments and organizations such as the American Lung Association, ALA, and the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, AAFA, and the state-run departments of natural resources, DNRs, who have input on how Purple Air monitors are placed on EPA AirNow maps. Near neighbors can monitor PM 2.5 from residential wood burning with Purple Air monitors and can download historical Purple Air data to show that the wood burning is not necessary, done in warm weather, done by neighbors who are already hooked up to natural gas, etc. Get local ordinances passed, get state laws passed, get national laws passed. Show up at hearings, such as the recent EPA hearings on lowering the safe level of PM 2.5 emissions. They are long and difficult, but worth it. Submit written comments. Write resolutions for state conservation congresses, which resolutions, if passed, can be submitted to your state legislators and discussed at state conservation congress meetings. Show up at American Lung Association lobbying days with legislators. Spread the good news. 1. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, held hearings in February and is taking public comments until March 31, 2023 on lowering the safe limits of particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, PM 2.5, down to 8 micrograms per meter cubed annually and 25 micrograms per meter daily. Wood smoke is 90% PM 2.5 and PM 2.5 is the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. 2. The Office of the Inspector General, OIG, the watchdog of the EPA, reported in February 2023 that the process of certifying residential wood stoves is flawed and results in wood stoves being certified and sold that do not even meet EPA standards. The EPA standards also allow PM 2.5 pollution to be emitted at unsafe levels. Measurements at the stack and/or measurements at the fence line. The fence line could be near neighbors' yards, would be scientifically accurate if done by PM2.5 monitors, whose data is available on the Purple Air website and the US EPA map of smoke and fire alongside $100,000 EPA standard monitors, correlated to EPA standard monitors with a simple mathematical formula. Keep focused on residential wood burning and PM2.5 pollution, but show links of ROSEP to objections to biomass, wood, burning, climate change from PM2.5 generally, and the flawed climate goals of nations around the world. Hypocrisy, lack of transparency, misuse of the terms renewable, zero carbon, carbon neutral, and no carbon. Emphasize science, science, science. Mission, culture of organization, vision, values leading to strategic plan. Be all about people. Reach out to the activists in the field, clean energy technicians, medical specialists, and territory managers. Wording, catchwords, catchy phrases, outreach with writing. American Lung Association, change it from within. Existing organizations such as Clean Air Revival Incorporated, Burning Issues, and GASP, etc. are resources. Be a face of a human being affected by this problem, but don't be a victim. Have your facts in order. Know what the opposition will be likely to do or say. Refute, refute, refute. If you feel that Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is analogous to Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MADD, use that analogy when asking individuals to be responsible for their own acts of harming their neighbors by increasing the likelihood of fatal traffic accidents, or by creating air pollution which increases the likelihood of their neighbors' fatal health conditions or deaths. For MADD, the breathalyzer test is used to curb drunk driving, and for ROSEP the PM2.5 monitor could be used to curb PM2.5 pollution affecting hyperlocalized areas where near neighbors of residential wood burners live and breathe. Historical opinions that wood burning is not carbon neutral. Opinion in 2023 that wood burning is not carbon neutral. ROSEP view. The takeaway from this 2023 article is that wood burning must be subsidized to compete as a viable energy source, according to the wood burning industry itself. Solar and wind are already cost competitive, even without subsidies. Without subsidies, there is no economic reason to burn wood. The argument in this article, that wood burning is not carbon neutral, is despite its label as renewable energy, burning wood from forests one of the worst activities for the environment. It releases emissions when burned and removes trees that store carbon. Near neighbors of residential wood burners in the United States could view as a secondary issue that wood from Washington state forests will be bound for Asia for burning. However, the wood from Washington state is also bound for the European Union for burning, and European Union laws subsidizing wood burning in the EU are responsible for that. If the US follows the EU's example more closely, there will be more wood burning subsidized in the US, which will not be good news for Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates. If a Venn diagram were drawn, there would be overlap between Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, near neighbors of residential wood burners, and forest advocates, but unfortunately PM2.5 pollution affecting human health is not much mentioned in articles written by forest advocates, while protecting human health is the driving force of Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates. Energy market for wood pellets globally threatens U.S. forests. Public News Service. Public News Service has increased dramatically around the world, especially in Europe where burning wood is treated as renewable energy and heavily subsidized. Energy market for wood pellets globally threatens U.S. forests. The European Union is the world's largest consumer of wood pellets for energy. Monday, March 20th, 2023.
Turn the heat though.
Episode 56J. Overseas markets could be harming forests in the U.S. Demand for wood pellets for biomass energy has increased dramatically around the world, especially in Europe where burning wood is treated as renewable energy and heavily subsidized. Excerpts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity on the subject that wood burning is not carbon neutral. The UK-based company Drax Group plans to build a 450,000-ton per year wood pellet plant in Longview, Washington State. Peter Riggs, director of the Washington State-based nonprofit Pivot Point, said the region has a productive wood sector. This new wood pellet plant proposed for Longview is very different, Riggs pointed out. First of all, it's not for the domestic market, it's not making pellets for home stoves. It represents a substantial and entirely new source of wood fiber demand for export. Riggs said much of the biomass would be bound for Asia. His organization signed a letter, along with more than 100 others in the US and Canada, calling for the European Union to stop incentivizing wood burning as renewable energy. Laura Haight, U.S. Policy Director for the Partnership for Policy Integrity, said despite its label as renewable energy, burning wood from forests one of the worst activities for the environment. It releases emissions when burned and removes trees that store carbon. Haight's organization also signed the letter to the European Union, urging it to no longer classify forest biomass as renewable. It's the money that's driving this system, Haight asserted. If they change that policy, then this will no longer be subsidized, and we can see a better future for our forests and for our climate. Riggs noted solar and wind energy were subsidized, and the costs have gone down dramatically. However, the same is not true for forest biomass. He emphasized plant operators have struggled to reduce the costs involved in sourcing, transporting, and burning biomass fuels. If they're going to subsidize it, you kind of got to subsidize it forever, Riggs contended. But with wind and solar, those are already cost competitive. Opinion in 2022 that wood burning is not carbon neutral. Rosette View. The article below states that on December 22, 2022, the United States $1.7 trillion omnibus spending bill declared forest bioenergy carbon neutral and instructed federal agencies to adopt policies supporting that assumption, discarding efforts in both the House and Senate to avoid the terminology. It is left to residents against wood smoke emission particulates to continue to argue that wood burning is not carbon neutral, and that wood burning emits more particulates of 2.5 micrometer size, PM 2.5, than fossil fuel coal burning, and that wood burning emits 450 times more particulates than the cleanest fossil fuel, natural gas, burning, if emissions are measured at the stack or the fence line. This article goes on to list arguments against the designation of wood burning as carbon neutral. 1. Scientists say the research on forest biomass defies simple declarations about what the carbon benefits are. Variables include how quickly forests grow back and how much carbon emissions occur in the harvesting, transporting, and ultimately burning of wood for energy. 2. EPA has stepped back from declarations during the Trump administration that forest biomass is carbon neutral, and the U.S. Energy Information Administration struck a nuanced position in its monthly energy review in November. 3. Critics of the wood-to-energy industry said they were disappointed by the provision's inclusion in the omnibus, which covers all federal agencies for the fiscal year that started October 1st. They attributed its endurance to Maine senior senator, Republican Susan Collins, an appropriator whose state is a timber industry leader with the balance of power so slim in the Senate. Republicans like Susan Collins can easily swing this sort of deal, said Laura Haight, U.S. Policy Director at the Partnership for Policy Integrity, a nonprofit energy and environment advocacy organization that's lobbied against biomass energy. We can only hope the EPA sticks to the science of biomass, not the politics. 4. The Partnership for Policy Integrity, PPI, and other groups wrote lawmakers earlier in December, urging against the biomass rider's inclusion. Carbon neutral scores another victory in omnibus. December 22, 2022. eNews.net. Since Rosep included excerpts from this article, above, arguing that wood burning is carbon neutral, excerpts edited by Raep for brevity and clarity, below, are the arguments by the wood-burning industry that wood burning is carbon neutral. Senator Susan Collins, Republican Maine, has long been a champion of declaring biomass to be carbon neutral. A perennial battle in Congress over the environmental effects of burning wood for energy has tipped again toward the biomass industry. The $1.7 trillion omnibus spending bill declares forest bioenergy carbon neutral and instructs federal agencies to adopt policies supporting that assumption, discarding efforts in both the House and Senate to avoid the terminology. Industry groups say turning woody biomass into energy doesn't add to net carbon emissions as long as forests aren't converted to non-forest uses in the process. The bill language, which has appeared annually for several years, reflects that position. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change excludes carbon released from the burning of biomass from its energy-related emissions reporting, the EIA said. A spokesperson for Collins said Maine and other states rely on biomass to meet their renewable energy goals. Recognizing the carbon neutrality of biomass encourages investments in working forests, harvesting operations, bioenergy, wood products, and paper manufacturing. The Southeast tops the U.S. wood pellet industry and ships the product to Europe, where governments view wood to energy positively compared to fossil fuels. The biggest company in the industry, Enviva, has lobbied for favorable policies, citing how carbon accounting reflects benefits. Enviva said Forest Service inventories suggest the amount of captured carbon is increasing every year in Southeast forests wood pellets compare favorably to coal, Enviva said on its website, referencing a 2015 study published in Environmental Research Letters. ROSEP View. In this 2022 article, arguments are made against designating wood burning carbon neutral. The article concludes by saying it is clear that the best way to reduce the climate impacts of home heating is to leave trees growing in the forest and invest in insulation and true low or zero carbon energy. The Venn diagram between residents against wood smoke emission particulates and the authors of this article would have 100% overlap in the priority of addressing residential wood burning pollution affecting human health. Wood fires bad for the planet, more evidence shows. Notion of wood burning as climate-neutral source of energy is quickly being invalidated by hard facts. Friday, February 25, 2022 1.00 EST. Excerpts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity on the subject that wood burning is not carbon neutral. We like to think of wood burning as a climate-neutral source of energy. This has led to subsidized wood burning for electricity generation. This idea relies on the carbon released from wood burning being reabsorbed by forests and woodland. Reality is more complex. 1. It takes time for new forests to regrow and absorb the carbon. For large-scale wood burning for power generation using wood imported from North America, it can take decades or perhaps more than a century for forests to reabsorb this additional carbon from our air. This means greater chances of irreversible climate tipping points before any possible benefits accrue. 2. For the same amount of heat or energy, burning wood releases more carbon dioxide than oil or gas. This means more carbon in the air immediately after burning wood for electricity compared with fossil fuels, and more carbon in the air after an evening in front of the wood fire than using the central heating. This extra carbon has to be absorbed by new tree growth before we can even talk about neutrality. A representative from Protect the Forest Sweden said, "Bioenergy aggravates the climate crisis." A study in Finland concluded that wood heating was the least climate-friendly option for Finnish homes. A French study has looked at ways to meet a rapid increase in demand for wood energy. These included cutting old forests or chopping down trees before they are fully grown. Episode 56K. Danish and Australian research highlights that home wood burning also produces methane. This is a powerful global heating gas and further skews the balance away from climate neutrality. Wood burning produces CO2, which adds to blackening of Arctic snow and increases melt rates. 3. Comparisons between the climate impacts of wood heating and alternatives are even worse if we compare it with heat pumps run by wind or other carbon-neutral energy. 4. Studies on supply chains are urgently needed to fully understand the impacts of home wood heating on our climate, woodlands, and biodiversity. 5. However, it is clear that the best way to reduce the climate impacts of home heating is to leave trees growing in the forest and invest in insulation and true low or zero carbon energy. Opinion in 2021 that wood burning is not carbon neutral. ROSEP view. In this article, the Dogwood Alliance, a community group protesting the pollution from the Enviva industrial wood burning plant in North Carolina, has much of the same priorities as residents against wood smoke emission particulates, except that ROSEP is focused on hyperlocalized pollution in the yards of near neighbors of residential wood burners. The Venn diagram overlap between both groups in terms of the priority of protecting human health would be close to 100%. Biomass is promoted as a carbon-neutral fuel. But is burning wood a step in the wrong direction? Many scientists and environmental campaigners question the industry's claims to offer a clean, renewable energy source that the planet desperately needs. Tuesday, October 5, 2021. Excerpts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity on the subject that wood burning is not carbon neutral. Thick dust has been filling the air and settling on homes in Deborah David's neighborhood of Hamlet, North Carolina, ever since a wood pellet plant started operating nearby in 2019. The 64-year-old said the pollution is badly affecting the health of the population. The older people have it the worst, she added. They stay inside most of the time, and when they do come out they struggle to breathe. They can't sit out in their yards like they used to. Deborah David lives near an Enviva wood pellet plant in Hamlet, North Carolina. Photograph, Dogwood Alliance. The plant, owned by Maryland-headquartered Enviva, the world's largest biomass producer, is one of 4 the company operates in North Carolina, turning trees into wood pellets, most of which are exported to the UK, Europe, and Japan to burn for energy. Biomass has been promoted as a carbon-neutral energy source by industry, some countries, and lawmakers on the basis that the emissions released by burning wood can be offset by the carbon dioxide taken up by trees grown to replace those burned. Yet there remain serious doubts among many scientists about its carbon-neutral credentials, especially when wood pellets are made by cutting down whole trees, rather than using waste wood products. It can take as much as a century for trees to grow enough to offset the carbon released. Burning wood for energy is also inefficient. Biomass has been found to release more carbon dioxide per unit of energy than coal or gas, according to a 2018 study and an open letter to the EU signed by nearly 800 scientists. This CO2 is theoretically reabsorbed by new trees, but some scientists suggest relying on biomass could actually end up increasing emissions just at the time when the world needs to sharply reduce emissions and reach goals of becoming net zero by 2050. Over the last decade, a wave of biomass plants across the U.S. South have access to the region's vast hardwood and other wetland forests on unprotected private lands. The biomass industry continues to grow, supported by subsidies especially from the UK as well as the EU, which declared biomass a carbon-neutral energy source in 2009 and is relying on it to help the bloc replace fossil fuel energy and meet climate goals. At least 22 plants in the southeast are now exporting pellets to Europe, according to the Southern Environmental Law Center, SELC. This number is increasing, with permits filed or issued for 12 more plants, according to the SELC. We feel trapped. Nearly 200 miles from Hamlet, Belinda Joyner, a retired resident of Garysburg, North Carolina, has been campaigning against the nearby Northampton County Enviva plant since it began operations in 2013. The UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said biomass can mitigate emissions, provided resources are developed sustainably and especially when wood residues and waste are used. In Garysburg, Joyner is calling on global policymakers and industry bosses to acknowledge the problems with biomass. She said the voices of those who live near wood pellet plants are still going unheard as the biomass industry continues to grow. Profit over people, that's how I see it, Joyner said. As long as they're making that money, they don't care how people feel and they don't care what's going on in your community. Opinion in 2020 that wood burning is not carbon neutral. Rosep view. The rider that wood burning is carbon neutral added in 2020 in the U.S. Senate to the stimulus bill was the elephant in the room that not enough people talked about. This 2020 article said the rider only was intended to last until September 2021. Whether it was removed or not affects whether residents against wood smoke emission particulates accepts the stimulus bill conditions will be effective in helping stop residential wood burning eventually. The 2020 article concludes, now some in Congress are pushing the U.S. to go down the wood burning path. The good news is that the rider, attached to the spending bill, only lasts through September 2021, when the budget expires. President-elect Joe Biden ran on a strong climate platform, including preserving forests. He and his new environmental team should take care not to allow the U.S. to fall into this trap. Did Biden fall into this trap and extend the rider declaring wood burning carbon neutral? Op-ed, is burning wood for power carbon neutral? Not a chance. Wood stacked among remains of the forest in Gdansk, Poland. December 28, 2020, 3:15 a.m. Pacific Time. Excerpt edited by Rosep for brevity and clarity on the subject. Wood burning is not carbon neutral. The mammoth pandemic stimulus and spending bill Congress passed last week includes billions of dollars to expand solar and wind energy. These are good measures to address greenhouse gas emissions. But the bill also contains a rider that would undercut those efforts. A provision added to the bill, pushed for by Senator Susan Collins, Republican Maine, declares that cutting down trees and burning them for energy is carbon neutral. This, of course, makes no sense. Burning wood will add to global warming, even if the wood replaces coal or natural gas, as scientific organizations and hundreds of scientists have long argued. In recent years, there has been a bizarre but dangerous push to retrofit power plants and factories to burn wood. The European Union has spurred this effort by adopting laws allowing wood to count as a carbon-free, renewable fuel. Countries in the EU responded by subsidizing power plants to burn wood. Utilities lobbied for this shift after realizing that their coal-fired power plants could stay in business if modified at public expense to mix in some use of wood. But the process of burning wood results in more carbon being released into the atmosphere than burning coal. Overall, using wood produces 2 to 3 times as much carbon per kilowatt-hour as burning coal or natural gas. Utilities using wood to meet clean energy requirements displaces the use of truly clean energy sources such as solar or wind. The origins of this bizarre way of thinking about burning wood for power generation lies in a misinterpretation of scientific guidance about how to count emissions. Since the early 1990s, countries have reported their emissions each year to the United Nations as part of a global treaty, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Because it is easier to count the carbon to be released from trees as soon as they are cut, a global scientific panel told countries to report the carbon at that stage. To avoid double counting, countries then do not count the carbon released into the atmosphere when the wood is burned. This national reporting system works because the emissions are counted somewhere. Lawmakers have misread this rule as a declaration that carbon from burning wood can be ignored entirely in national and local laws for power plants and factories, as has been the case with Europe's renewable energy laws and emissions trading system. Episode 56 AL. Lawmakers have misread this rule as a declaration that carbon from burning wood can be ignored entirely in national and local laws for power plants and factories, as has been the case with Europe's renewable energy laws and emissions trading system. The reporting to the UN does not cure the fact that countries are encouraging power plants and factories to do the wrong thing. Burning wood for energy is accelerating with alarming speed in Europe, a 70% increase in Europe's tree cutting since 2015. And much of Europe's wood is coming from the US. If the world tried to pursue this strategy at even a small scale, the consequences would be dire for the world's forests. To replace just 2% of the world's fossil fuels with more wood would require doubling the commercial harvest of trees. The government of the Netherlands and several major political parties in Denmark have promised to phase out the use of wood, although details are still forthcoming. Now some in Congress are pushing the U.S. to go down the wood-burning path. The good news is that the rider, attached to the spending bill, only lasts through September 2021, when the budget expires. President-elect Joe Biden and his new environmental team should take care not to allow the U.S. to fall into this trap. Opinion in 2019 that wood burning is not carbon neutral. According to this article, wood burning is not carbon neutral, unless the wood would decompose anyway. Rosep View. This 2019 article from Minnesota spends most of its time declaring, usually from a wood-burning industry perspective, that wood burning is carbon neutral, but with the caveats, 1, if the wood would decompose anyway, which is hard to prove in reality, and 2, if 100% of carbon at the stack of an industrial wood-burning plant is caught and captured at the stack. In ensuing years, it has been shown to residents against wood smoke emission particulates that carbon capture is much more expensive and ultimately futile, and that carbon should not be emitted in the first place, by choosing instead to use energy from solar and wind powering a revamped electrical grid attached efficiently to U.S. homes using heat pumps that operate at temperatures well below 0 Fahrenheit. Climate curious, is burning wood for heat carbon neutral? St. Paul, Minnesota. November 9, 2019, 7 a.m. Listen, climate curious, is burning wood for heat carbon neutral? NPR News. Excerpts edited by Rosep for brevity and clarity on the subject of wood burning is not carbon neutral. How much carbon is released by burning firewood compared to letting the same tree decompose in the woods? Is heating with wood carbon neutral? Wood, unlike oil, coal, and natural gas, is not considered a fossil fuel. But burning firewood gives off carbon. Burning that wood for heat is carbon neutral, as long as it's managed in a way that allows for new growth and new opportunities for carbon absorption. But it wouldn't be a good thing if all of us switched out our natural gas furnaces for wood furnaces. In urban areas, burning wood contributes other kinds of pollution that are harmful to people's health, especially the tiny particles in soot that can get into people's lungs. Eventually, wood is going to break down. It's going to create heat, some heat, through decomposition. So, the wood-burning industry spokesperson said, why not let it heat up our buildings by burning it in a plant that, unlike your home fireplace, has pollution controls to keep soot out of the air? Opinion in 2018 that wood burning is not carbon neutral. Rosep View. In this 2018 article, the dramatic statement is made yesterday, April 23, 2018. The Environmental Protection Agency announced that it would begin to count the burning of forest biomass, a.k.a. wood, as carbon neutral. The article goes on to say that some argue burning wood will only increase climate change, for 5 reasons. The 5 reasons are, A1, biomass is only sustainable on long-time scales. A2, forests need proper management to remain carbon neutral. A3, carbon emissions don't just come from burning. A4, the EPA has not yet completed its scientific analysis. A5, reliance on wood could spark widespread clear-cutting. Residents against wood smoke emission particulates thinks that this issue of whether wood burning is carbon neutral is simpler. B1, whether biomass is economically sustainable or sustains forests by replanting does not affect the fact that carbon is emitted from wood burning at higher levels of carbon emission than its fellow solid, fossil, fuel coal burning, and at 450 times the emission of carbon than the cleanest, fossil, fuel natural gas burning. B2, forests in 2022 and 2023 are burning in unprecedented wildfires, despite forestry management. B3, carbon emissions from wood burning, properly measured at the stack or fence line by PM2.5 monitors, are a substantial portion of carbon emissions, and as mentioned before, surpass the emissions from coal or natural gas, fossil fuel, burning. 4. Scientists objected to this designation of wood burning as carbon neutral, and cited numerous studies to refute the political contention that wood burning is carbon neutral. B5. Increase in clear cutting has come true in 2023, but the concern of residents against wood smoke emission particulates is not primarily, as it is for forest advocates, on clear cutting, but on the immediate effect of residential wood burning on the health effects of PM2.5 emissions on near neighbors. In this way, ROSEP can cite reasons not to politically designate wood burning carbon neutral that are immediately understandable to the average resident. If politicians listened to the average resident, politicians would not go along with the foolhardy claim that wood burning is carbon neutral. The EPA declared that burning wood is carbon neutral. It's actually a lot more complicated. Here are 5 things to know about the controversial change. April 24, 2018. Excerpts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity on the subject. Wood burning is not carbon neutral. Yesterday, the Environmental Protection Agency announced that it would begin to count the burning of forest biomass, a.k.a. wood, as carbon neutral. The change will classify burning of wood pellets a renewable energy similar to solar or wind power. In his statement, EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt claims the change is a win for sustainable energy and the forestry industry. The problem is, as Chris Mooney and Dino Grandoni point out at the Washington Post, the carbon-neutral status of wood is fraught. Some argue that it will only exacerbate climate change. Here are 5 things to know about this controversial energy source. 1. Biomass is only sustainable on long timescales. While burning wood immediately releases carbon, it takes decades, or even a century, for a replacement tree to absorb the same amount of carbon. In the meantime, all that atmospheric carbon will continue to drive climate change. 2. Forests need proper management to remain carbon neutral. Even if a tree is planted for every tree converted to fuel pellets, trees regrown on plantations don't store the same carbon as natural forests. One recent study suggests it would take 40 to 100 years for a managed forest to capture the same amount of carbon as a natural forest. Since most plantation forests are harvested at 20-year intervals, they will never make it to the carbon-neutral point. Unless forests are guaranteed to regrow to carbon parity, production of wood pellets for fuel is likely to result in more CO2 in the atmosphere. 3. Carbon emissions don't just come from burning. If a significant amount of that soil carbon is added to the atmosphere, due to microbial activity in warmer soils, that will accelerate the global warming process. 4. The EPA has not yet completed its scientific analysis. The announcement comes before the EPA's Science Advisory Board has finished its deliberations. This is something that the EPA acknowledges in its press release, which states that the board's process has not yet resulted in a workable, applied approach. But according to its policy statement on the matter, the EPA claims that the change will boost rural economies and the timber industry as well as reduce pests and wildfires. Labeling biomass as carbon neutral has political element to it. Members of Congress have long pushed for this redefinition for economic reasons. 5. Reliance on wood could spark widespread clear cutting. The European Union is already relying on burning wood as a carbon-neutral energy source to meet Paris Accord emission goals. Episode 56 AM. And one of the big arguments used to support the switch to wood is that the industry would rely on the limbs, chips, and sawdust produced by logging and milling that would already be incinerated. But in reality, that's not what's happening. The demand for wood pellets has sparked an increase in logging in the American South and across Europe. It's also fueled illegal old-growth logging in ecologically sensitive areas, including the Carpathian Mountains of Romania and national parks in Slovakia. The demand for pellets is only increasing, jumping 40% between 2012 and 2015 alone. As more climate-conscious countries, like Japan, South Korea, and China begin to use this wood pellet loophole, logging will continue to expand, likely undermining the climate goals the regulations are intended to support. Opinion in 2016 that wood burning is not carbon neutral. ROSUP view, the National Resources Defense Council, NRDC, stated reasons to object to a biomass rider on U.S. legislation back in 2016. National Resources Defense Council. U.S. Senate must reject forest biomass rider. June 20, 2016. Excerpts edited by ROSUP for brevity and clarity. Last week, the U.S. Senate Appropriations Committee approved the Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies funding bill that includes language that would do lasting damage to our forests and climate, and would undermine the EPA's ability to regulate damaging carbon pollution. The unrelated policy rider attached to the spending bill would give a free pass to the biomass industry to pollute by allowing carbon emissions from power plants burning forest biomass, chipped up branches, limbs, and whole trees to go unregulated. It would set a dangerous precedent of legislating science by forcing EPA to use fundamentally flawed carbon accounting and would set back our efforts to fight climate change. As the appropriations bill moves to the floor, senators must reject this and other anti-environmental policy riders. The rider states, forest biomass carbon emissions from a facility that combusts forest biomass for energy do not require regulation, control, or action if timberland carbon stocks are stable or increasing in a region compared to a regional baseline. In effect, if a biomass power plant is located in a region where the net forest growth is positive, then the plant is exempt from carbon regulations or controls. This approach is fundamentally flawed because it cannot detect or quantify the carbon emissions from an individual biomass burning facility, and it does not establish a cause and effect between the power plant and the region's forests. The language is therefore nothing more than an accounting charade. It leaves biomass power plants unaccountable for their pollution. The EPA's own Science Advisory Board and many peer-reviewed studies have rejected the approach. Forest biomass emissions could be granted an exemption simply because the location of a stationary facility is in an area where forest stocks are increasing. It fails to capture the causal connection between forest biomass growth and harvesting and atmospheric impact, and thus may incorrectly assess net CO2 emissions of a facility's use of a biogenic feedstock. 1. Despite the clear rejection of this approach, the authors of the rider insist Congress mandate its use. The Senate must reject biomass riders and similar provisions that provide a free pass-on from carbon pollution for the biomass industry. Support for these types of provisions undermines our nation's efforts to address climate change, mandates flawed science through legislative decree, and undermines the authority of the Environmental Protection Agency. Opinion pre-2008 that wood burning is not carbon neutral, and carbon emitted from wood burning is harmful to human health. The website Burning Issues existed when Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, ROSUP, began in 2008. Research papers on the adverse health effects of wood smoke from the earliest years of the 21st century are still available on the website. http://burningissues.org/car-test/videos.html Guide for new visitors. The Burning Issues website contains a great deal of information. This page lists some of the highlights of the site. We suggest that you peruse this information first. The top pages are General. WHO estimates that 7 million deaths annually are linked to air pollution. Adverse health effects and regulatory challenges related to outdoor wood boilers and residential wood combustion, 183 kilobytes, by Philip R. E. Johnson, which summarizes the problem and states, current evidence suggests that the PM2.5 NAAQS, National Ambient Air Quality Standards, is not an effective means to protect populations from peaking wood smoke exposures. Science. Preface by Dr. Waynott. A very short overview. 12-year study of particulate pollution in a residential neighborhood of Redwood City, California, showing that there has been no improvement in a dozen years. Stove switch-out programs have a failure. World Health Organization, 2 million premature deaths every year due to air pollution. They urge cleaning up the air. AIDS kills over 2 million people a year. Economist, February 18, 2008. Why do we think that AIDS is a catastrophe, but air pollution isn't? Wood smoke particle. A microphotograph of an actual wood smoke particle removed from a patient's lung and depictions of the size of such particles. Temperature inversions play an important role in trapping smoke on clear cold evenings. EPA report showing that certified wood stoves deteriorate over time. Carnegie Mellon study looking for effects of a coal-fired power plant found larger contribution of wood smoke than that of the coal-fired power plant and comparable to that of the smelter in downtown Pittsburgh. Wood smoke is an important source of dioxins and PCBs. Neighborhood monitoring done by Burning Issues. New estimates of premature deaths, 830 kilobytes, from long-term exposure to PM2.5. CSF Chronically article discussing this report. In Southern California and the San Joaquin Valley, dirty air kills more than car crashes. It may be tempting to think California can't afford to clean up, but in fact dirty air is like a $28 billion lead balloon on our economy, said Jane Hall, lead author of the study at Cal State Fullerton. We should emphasize climate neutral rather than carbon neutral, which covers only part of the wood burning problem. Educational materials. Brochures and fact sheets. 2003 Wood Smoke Brochure Black and White, 183 kilobytes PDF, annotated version of the brochure with references, 143 kilobytes PDF. 2007 brochure, this is a general wood smoke brochure. It explains the wood smoke problem and other air toxins, and talks about what you can do about it. Cancer brochure. This brochure describes the ways that wood smoke is particularly dangerous for cancer patients, and steps that can lessen their exposure. Medical effects fact sheet. OWB fact sheet, 102 kilobytes PDF. OWB brochure, September 2008, 228 kilobytes PDF. Slideshow provides a quick introduction. Our experience has shown that eye care machines with the coarse filter attachment, one per room, provide superior protection during smoke emergencies for me. They are expensive. There are a number of brands of air cleaner which claim to remove air pollution, as well as a number of low-cost, about $50, do-it-yourself projects to be found on youtube.com. iCare has never provided financial support to Clean Air Revival Incorporated. A new 5-minute video featuring the Tasmanian president of the Australian Lung Foundation, Dr. James Marcos. Medical effects. Ultrafine particle health effects, a really fine summary by John R. Froines, Ph.D. PowerPoint presentation, 2,208 kilobytes. Southern California Particle Center. PowerPoint presentation, 2,208 kilobytes. Excellent survey slideshow of health effects. Excellent summary of the medical arguments against wood burning prepared by the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment, UPHE, 111 kilobytes PDF. Episode 56, and a great list of wood-burning facts from the same organization, Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment, 2 megabytes, by Dr. Harriet Ammon. 2 of the slides were generated by Burning Issues. Fine particulate air pollution linked with increased autism risk. December 2014. GASP presentation entitled Effects of Air Pollution on Cardiovascular Disease, 1.1 megabytes. GASP presentation entitled Air Pollution and the Respiratory System, 7.6 megabytes. Wood smoke emissions effects on host pulmonary immune defense, Judith T. Zelikoff, Ph.D. In a laboratory study at New York University, animals exposed to wood smoke immediately had a 25% decrease in the lung's ability to clear bacteria, and after just 1.5 to 2.5 hours, had decreases of 23% to 61% in lung function. 2007 New England Journal of Medicine article showing that women are more sensitive than men to the effects of wood smoke. How particulate matter causes coagulation leading to arterial thrombosis, 2007. Wood smoke exposure can be detected with a urine test. Heating and cooking. Wood smoke from heating and cooking raises lung cancer risk. Destination Brain. Mexico City children surveyed exhibit cognitive impairments in memory, problem solving, and judgment and deficiencies in their sense of smell. Air pollution associated with diabetes prevalence, 197 kilobytes. Increasing exposure to fine particulate matter air pollution may be one factor explaining the dramatic rise in diabetes prevalence over the past few decades, according to research published in the October issue of Diabetes Care. October 2011. Legal. October 27, 2014. British Columbia Supreme Court judge order cease and desist order using fireplace. Newspaper story and ruling. May 22, 2009. Judge prohibits outdoor wood boiler in Jackson, Michigan. March 6, 2009 testimony before Connecticut lawmakers on H.R. 6616, an act establishing wood smoke as a public nuisance. It includes a fine summary of health effects of wood smoke by a public health toxicologist. 1992 judgment by Oregon Court of Appeals found that smoke intrusion is trespass. This may be an important precedent for judicial protection from particular wood burners. Judgments against wood burners. There has been a lot of recent actions where wood burners have lost. 2010 judgment in Quebec Small Claims Court awarded damages to smoke victim. Actual judgment, 598 kilobytes. Scientific papers. John A. Cooper's 1980 paper on residential wood burning is the earliest paper on the subject that we have seen, and it seems to have said it all. Scanned full text of Cooper's paper. Climate change. May people believe that at worst burning wood is carbon neutral. Particles cause climate change shows that belief to be incorrect. Controlling soot might quickly reverse a century of global warming published by Wired, July 29, 2010, the title says it all. This dramatically illustrates that when considering wood burning or any combustion carbon neutral is very different from climate neutral, indeed. Biofuels deemed a greenhouse threat and also increase the total particulate pollution. Economics. $150 billion problem using arguments similar to Jared Diamond and Collapse, How Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed, New York, Viking, 2005. An engineer's perspective on heating with solid fuels. Many wood burners use the high cost of energy to justify wood burning. These people should see and understand Energy Initiative by Al Gore. Keep in mind and use the search page, which provides a goggle search of all the pages on the Burning Issues website. Welcome to burningissues.org, homepage for Clean Air Revival Incorporated. Burning solid fuel yields particulate pollution, solid particles smaller than a red blood cell, which have been implicated in 30,000 deaths in the U.S. and 2.1 million deaths worldwide per year. Particulate pollution is the most important contaminant in our air. We know that when particle levels go up, people die. Indeed, wood smoke is chemically active in the body 40 times longer than tobacco too.
1. Joel Schwartz, Ph.D., Harvard School of Public Health, e-Magazine, September Oct. 2002.
2. William. A prior, persistent free radicals in wood smoke, an ESR spin trapping study, Free Radical Biology and Medicine 1989, 7, 1-17-21. Each year, smoke from wood stoves and fireplaces contributes over 420,000 tons of fine particles throughout the country, mostly during the winter months. Nationally, residential wood combustion accounts for 44% of total stationary and mobile polycyclic organic matter, POM, emissions and 62% of the 7 polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAH, which are probable human carcinogens and are of great concern to EPA 3. 3. Strategies for reducing residential wood smoke. EPA document #EPA 456/B09-001, September 2009. Prepared by Outreach and Information Division, Air Quality Planning Division, Office of Air Quality Planning and Standards, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, 27711. Pages 4 to 5. The wood smoke issue, comparison of fuel emissions. All combustion results in very fine microparticulates, and there is no safe level of this asbestos-sized, dangerous air pollutant. Solid fuels, such as pellets and especially wood, produce many orders of magnitude more smoke and fine particulate air pollutants than cleaner fuels. The importance of clean air. Clean Air Revival provides public education about the medical hazards of exposure to wood smoke and other fine particulate pollution. Smoke from residential burning of wood and coal, wood-burning restaurants and outdoor burning of wood, leaves, crops, tires, and debris is permeating our neighborhoods, resulting in high ground level concentrations of toxic air pollution.